This is Carol Ventresca, Executive Director of Employment for Seniors.
And I'm Brett Johnson, Board Member with Employment for Seniors.
Thanks for listening to this episode of The Successful Encore Career, presented by Employment for Seniors, the premier resource linking mature adults with employment opportunities in Central Ohio. In this episode, Brett had the opportunity to speak with Bill LaFayette, owner of Regionomics.
That's right, Carol. We've both known Bill for many years, and I thought he'd be a great interview for the Successful Encore Career podcast. He and I were able to talk about how he has successfully navigated through his career changes, and he offers up some great advice from what he's learned.
Let's find out what makes the successful Encore career.
I want to welcome Bill LaFayette, owner of Regionomics, to the Successful Encore Career Studio. Now, Regionomics is a consulting business specializing in small area economies with a focus on strategic economic and workforce analysis and planning services. They help clients in public, private, and academic and not-for-profit sectors understand regional and community economic and demographic trends and work with them to develop strategies to respond to those trends. You can learn more about Regionomics after this podcast at Regionomics LLC.com. Bill, thanks again for being a guest on the Successful Encore Career podcast.
Well, thanks for having me, Brett.
Your time growing up, what type of employment did your parents, your family have? What was around you when you grew up?
Well, I grew up in the Springfield area, Springfield, Ohio. And my father put in 30 years at International Harvester. He was actually the plant photographer, although his degree was chemistry, as was my mother's. She taught before I was born, but once I was born, she stopped working and was just home with my brother and me, and that's how we grew up. But one of the things that I hark back to my father always saying is, you never make money working for somebody else. So maybe that planted a seed. I don't know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's interesting that comment, I think it's generational. That comment's always made. It doesn't matter when we've lived. Mm-hmm. There's always that situation of having to go to work.
Right.
And work for someone else and know that a majority of that paycheck is going to somebody else, know, that sort of thing, yeah. Your employment history up to Regionomics, let's talk about that. Again, you have many years in the education field.
I do. But that I've sort of stumbled into, believe it or not. My father got very interested in the stock market when I was probably 11 or 12 years old. And so he would spend his weekends building charts and studying stocks and that sort of thing. And it really intrigued me. And it was something that I thought I wanted to go into. I wanted to be a security analyst and take over Wall Street and manage portfolios. And so I went to Wright State and got an undergrad and a master's in investments. And so that was the career path I figured I'd have. But in my last quarter in my MBA at Wright State, my dean called me up and said, hey, we've got this guy from Ashland College coming in to interview. I don't have anybody to talk to him. Would you talk to him? If you talk to him, I'll buy you lunch. And as a poor, starving grad student, you do not turn an offer like that down. So I went and talked to him, and I had never really thought much about teaching simply because I was petrified speaking in front of groups. And so he got me, in that interview, he got me at least interested in the idea. He invited me up to campus for a day, and at the end of that day, that is what I wanted to do. And so they offered me the job. I took it. I was there for 2 years, absolutely loved it, and figured that I would be a college professor for the rest of my life. And so I came down here to Columbus to start my PhD, and the goal was to get a PhD so that I could continue in teaching. I went through the finance PhD program, realized that the research in real estate was more interesting, and so midway through my doctorate, I kind of switched my major into real estate, like some 19-year-old undergrad. I got hired by the University of North Texas without my dissertation being done, and went down there and taught for 2.5 years. This was in Denton, just outside Dallas. My dissertation wound up going not nearly as well as I expected, not nearly as well as my advisor expected. And so it wasn't going to get done unless I came back here and finished it. So that I did. But when I finished it, a year or two later, there were no teaching jobs to be had. And so I found myself thinking about jobs outside academia, and I kind of stumbled into economic development. I took a job at what was then Rickenbacker Port Authority, which managed Rickenbacker International Airport and its foreign trade zone and its industrial park. I was brought in to work with the industrial park, but we all realized that I was needed more on the air side. And so I wound up learning more about airfield layout and air cargo and logistics than I ever thought I'd know. And so that was an interesting job for a while, but then it got to be same old, same old. And so I heard of a job at the Greater Columbus Chamber of Commerce, and so I applied for the job, got hired, and so I became the vice president of economic analysis. My job was to analyze, understand, and explain the Central Ohio economy internally and externally, help with policy, all that sort of thing. But the job changed, the organization changed, and I found myself once more in kind of a stuck place. Mm-hmm. And so the only thing that I could do, really, I thought about all the cool stuff that I wanted to do, and I kind of asked myself, well, if I go somewhere else and do this stuff, is there somewhere I could go? And the answer came back, well, really, no. I could do pieces, parts, but I couldn't do the whole thing. And so starting my business became kind of inescapable.
So the aha moment, if I want to do what I want to do, it's got to be on my own terms.
Right. Well, that and the fact that I had focused on Central Ohio for now 12 years.
Right.
And I wanted to look at other regions, other economies, and especially parts of Ohio that arguably needed some more help and support than this region did and does. And so that was part of my thought process, too.
When you made that choice, I'm going to do it, what stumbling blocks did you run into?
Well, I guess the biggest one was simply the fear factor. And the fear factor stops so many people who have these ideas for their own businesses. And I wound up just overcoming that by talking to everybody I could think of. Other people who were doing consulting work, potential customers whom I had run into at the chamber, who I basically asked them, well, if I started charging you for this stuff that I'm now giving you for free, would you do it? Would you pay for it? And a great resource, one of the first resources I went to, was the Small Business Development Center, which is affiliated with Columbus State. And I think if you know about the SBDC at all, you possibly think that you have to go in with this fully formed business plan and 3 references and all that. Not at all. I went in with this idea. And I asked essentially 2 questions, the same 2 questions I asked of everyone else. First of all, why in the world would anybody give me money to do this? Second, related question, if I do this, will I starve? I guess third question, are there landmines that I'm not thinking about that come with running a business, owning a business? And after all that, I just I got enough confidence to realize that this was going to work. I asked my husband to brace for impact, and my last day as a wage earner was August 19th, 2011. I am never going back.
I've heard that comment so many times. Do it. Mm-hmm. Do it. You'll never look back, but do it. Do it. Do it.
Yes.
And your comment to talking to a lot of people too, and I agree with this as well too. Whether you're asking questions about how to do it, mm-hmm. like you said, the landmines and such, but it's also that accountability.
Right.
You're telling, I'm going to do this. I'm
right.
going to do this. And they're going to ask next time they see you. You got to have an answer.
Right. Yeah, it does sort of put yourself on the line, and that can be a good thing.
It can. You're right. It might move things along at least a little bit faster than powers that be that you have no control over, but at least your head's down. You're moving forward. How did you come across the SBDC as a resource?
Well, that's a funny story because the only reason why I knew the SBDC even existed was that they were co-located with the Chamber when I started at the Chamber in 1999. If that hadn't been the case, I would have had no idea that they even existed. And because they're funded by the Small Business Administration, their services are free. And you can just go in for counseling. You can go in and take workshops and classes, and they're just a tremendous resource. But there are a number of good resources for entrepreneurs in Central Ohio that aren't talked about nearly as often as they ought to be.
Name some.
Well, the Columbus Library, for one. They have a dedicated section for small business owners, would-be small business owners. Service Corps of Retired Executives, SCORE, and the Small Business Administration.
You had mentioned, go back to the point of talking to a lot of people and having conversations, asking questions and such, leads me to the networking mm-hmm. piece to it. Obviously, with your chamber background, the networking had to be deep-rooted in the main source of what you're going to do.
Yes. That was one of the major benefits of being at the Chamber for as long as I was, and frankly, being the Chamber's spokesperson for anything economic. I was in the paper all the time, sometimes on radio, sometimes on TV, so I had name recognition out of the box. And so I had an inherent advantage that many people don't have. But ongoing networking is absolutely critical. You cannot succeed without being out there, just kind of introducing yourself to people, letting them know what you do, having a good sense of what your potential customer base is, being creative about identifying that, and then going and talking to those people. People in Central Ohio are friendly. They will talk to you. If you ask somebody to have a cup of coffee, 9 times out of 10 they'll say yes, and you can learn and share your insights with people who would benefit from hearing them.
All right. Part of that networking, as well as the face-to-face, is the LinkedIn piece to it, and it's a professional social media tool. Obviously, that's important in your world as well. How have you used it, as well as other possible other social media tools that have come into play for what you're doing too? Honestly,
the most important social media tool for me is Facebook. Regionomics LLC has a Facebook page. I have a Twitter feed, which is at Regionomics LLC. I, of course, have my professional LinkedIn page. The nice thing about Facebook for what I do is that I can post ideas up on the page. I can do links, and obviously you can do the same thing in LinkedIn, but I just tend to favor the Facebook page. Personal preference, I guess. I'll link to other people's work. I'll share links to my own work.
It's interesting in the field that you are in that Facebook actually works to you in your eyes, and obviously there's proof in the pudding. Better than LinkedIn. That's interesting.
Well, honestly, it's probably again personal preference, and if I mind LinkedIn more than I do, it could probably be as helpful, if not more helpful. I just find myself on Facebook much more than I do on LinkedIn.
That's interesting, yeah. Do you have a mentor that you work with?
I've just had a number of mentors over the years, including some of the folks that I talked to when I was starting my business, that I talk to still when strange things come up, like somebody doesn't pay. Should I charge them that late fee that I have on my invoices or no? And just to kind of bounce ideas off of. And some of my mentors are on the small business side. Some are on the community development side. Colleagues who have interesting ideas about the way communities grow, change, and can be shaped, which really is at the heart of what I do. And so, mentor / colleague / friend. My big social / professional outlet is the Metropolitan Club. I'm there almost every week unless something serious comes up. That's not only a place to meet and get to know truly interesting, wonderful people, it's a place where you can learn more about your community. And for somebody like me, that's my bread and butter.
Right. Going back to your time with the Chamber and in your transition to Regionomics LLC, were you able to stay close with the chamber and use it as a resource because of the parting of the ways?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, good.
Yeah, absolutely.
How did you bridge that gap? I know because a lot of times when someone's at a position for many, many years, and sometimes it breaks off bad, or just you want to break away and you don't want anything to go back to, but that seemed to be a core to what you got from and you needed. How did you approach that and go back to work with them with a new position with Regionomics?
Well, the chamber, being the chamber, is always happy to see new businesses get formed. Okay. And so we parted ways on absolutely the best of terms. They were incredibly gracious and supportive, and I have friends still who work at the chamber. I've done some work for the chamber. I've done some work for 2020, and I guess it's just a function of how you related to the organization that you're in while you were in it, and how the organization functions itself, how it relates to you.
Right. Okay.
So my cases may not be that of other folks, but it continues to be very cordial.
Good. One last piece of advice for those in the midst of that encore career change. What would you're having coffee with that person. Coffee ends, you're walking away. Oh, by the way, last sage advice I got to give you. What would you tell that person?
Prepare carefully. Do not go out without carefully laying the groundwork. I come back to the question that I brought up a few minutes ago. Why in the world would anybody give me money for what I'm trying to give them? And if you can't answer that question clearly, convincingly both to yourself and to others, you may need to think about it some more. But business ownership is not for the faint of heart. You have to have a good financial cushion. You have to understand carefully tax impacts, marketing, accounting. I always say thank heaven for my MBA, but you need to gather some people around you, professionals who can help you with that sort of thing. But just prepare. Took me 6 months.
Thanks again for being on the Successful Encore Career Podcast.
Well, thank you, Brett, and good luck to all of you.
Thanks for listening to the Successful Encore Career Podcast presented by Employment for Seniors. This podcast is available on our website, employseniors.org, as well as iTunes or your preferred podcast player. If you like what you've heard, consider donating to Employment for Seniors to help us defray the cost of producing the podcast. Go to employseniors.org and click on the Donate Now button. Any amount is appreciated, and we'll make sure we thank you for your support in an upcoming podcast episode. Employment for Seniors is the premier resource linking mature adults with employment opportunities. If you are 50 years of age or older living in Central Ohio, we are here to help you find employment. If you are a Central Ohio employer, our mature, talented, skilled, and dependable job seekers will provide significant value to your organization. Follow us on LinkedIn, Facebook, and Twitter. If you have a topic or an interview idea, let us know. Send us an email at info@employseniors.org or podcast@employseniors.org.